The ammunition crates were organized wrong. Every single one of them. Specialist Yara Okonkwo stood in the supply warehouse at Forward Operating Base Warhorse and felt the familiar tension settle into her shoulders as she surveyed the mess someone had made of her system. 7.62 rounds mixed with 5.56. Grenades stored next to flares. It was the kind of carelessness that got people killed, and she had spent 3 weeks building an organization method that prevented exactly this kind of chaos. Before we get into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state or country you're watching from. Maybe you know someone whose true abilities were hidden from the world around them. She heard them before she saw them. 3 sets of boots on concrete. The heavy, confident stride of men who believed they owned whatever ground they walked on. Sergeant First Class Dale Hendricks appeared in the warehouse doorway with 2 soldiers flanking him like an entourage. 14 years in the Army had taught Hendricks exactly one lesson, and that lesson was that his opinion mattered more than anyone else's. Well, look at this, Hendricks announced to no one in particular. The blanket counter is playing with bullets again. Yara did not look up. She continued sorting ammunition, her hands moving with a precision that came from somewhere deeper than her 19 months in the supply field. The 7.62 rounds felt familiar in her fingers, each one a small promise of distance and accuracy that she had learned to keep secret. Hendricks moved closer, his presence filling the space with the particular menace of a man who had never been told no by anyone he considered beneath him. You know, Okonkwo, I have been in this army a long time, seen a lot of soldiers come and go, and I have never understood why they keep sending women to forward operating bases. You're supposed to be support. You're supposed to stay back where it is safe and count things. One of his soldiers laughed. The other had the decency to look uncomfortable. Yara placed another round in its proper crate. The motion was automatic, freeing her mind to calculate other things. The distance from the warehouse door to the guard tower. The wind speed coming through the gap in the corrugated metal roof. The way Hendricks's bootlaces were tied incorrectly for desert terrain. Details that a supply clerk should not notice. Details she could not stop herself from cataloging. Hendricks reached past her and swept his arm across the crate she had just organized. Ammunition scattered across the concrete floor, rolling into shadows and dust. His smile was the smile of a man who had discovered he could hurt someone without leaving bruises. "Oops," he said. The warehouse went quiet. Yara's hands stopped moving. She looked at the scattered rounds, then up at Hendricks, and something in her expression made the uncomfortable soldier take a half step backward. It was not anger, not exactly. It was assessment, the look of someone measuring a target. "You got something to say, Specialist?" "No, Sergeant." Hendricks leaned closer. "That is what I thought. You know what you are? You are a waste of a deployment slot. Non-combat personnel taking up space that a real soldier could use. You should be back at Fort Hood filing paperwork, not pretending you belong out here with us." A sound from the doorway interrupted him. Private First Class Dante Wilder struggled through with a crate twice his size, his 19-year-old frame barely managing the weight. He stumbled, and the crate began to tip. Yara moved without thinking. She caught the edge of the crate, steadied it, and helped Wilder lower it to the ground. The motion took 3 seconds. She did not speak, did not expect thanks, simply returned to collecting the scattered ammunition as if nothing had happened. Hendricks watched this with the expression of a man who had been denied his entertainment. He pointed at Wilder. "You, new guy, learn from this. That right there is what non-combat looks like. Counting and lifting. That is all they are good for." Wilder glanced at Yara, something like gratitude in his eyes. She gave him nothing back, just continued her work, but she made sure to organize the crate he had carried with extra care. Later she would show him how to lift properly, so his back would not give out before his first year was done. Small kindnesses that cost her nothing and meant everything to soldiers who had no one else looking out for them. The door banged open again, and Corporal Tomas Delgado burst in carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of a man who had too much coffee and not enough sense. "Yo, Yara, you are not going to believe what came through on the convoy manifest. We got like 400 pounds of stuff that nobody ordered, and I cannot figure out where it is supposed to go. And also, I think someone sent us a crate of pillows, which seems wrong for a combat zone. But hey, maybe Command wants us to be comfortable while we are getting mortared. Hendricks rolled his eyes. I'm out of here. He gestured to his soldiers. Let the children play with their inventory sheets. After he left, Delgado dropped onto a crate and let out a breath. That guy is the worst. Seriously, the absolute worst. Why does he hate you so much? Yara shrugged. Some people need someone to hate. Makes them feel tall. Delgado watched her work for a moment, his chatter pausing as he noticed something. Hey, why do you organize the weapons stuff different than the other supply clerks? Like you sort by caliber and range, instead of just alphabetical. It is actually way more efficient for combat resupply, but nobody taught us that in AIT. Yara's hands hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Old habit, she said. My father was particular about organization. Delgado opened his mouth to ask another question, but the radio on the wall crackled with the evening briefing announcement. He grabbed his clipboard and headed for the door, still talking about pillows and manifests and the general absurdity of military logistics. Alone in the warehouse, Yara finished her organization in silence. Her fingers brushed across a crate marked for long-range rifles, and she felt the old familiar longing rise up in her chest. 2,000 meters. That had been her record back when she was still allowed to be who she really was. Before the promise. Before her mother's eyes had pleaded with her to choose safety over skill. She closed the crate and walked to the briefing without looking back. The convoy manifest was posted on the board when she arrived. Hendricks stood beside Captain Drummond, pointing at names and laughing about something. When he saw Yara enter, his smile widened. Okonkwo, good timing. You have been assigned to tomorrow's supply run. Congratulations. Yara looked at the manifest. Route Tampa, the most dangerous road in Diyala province. The route where the Ghost had already killed 7 coalition soldiers with shots no one could trace. She nodded once. Understood, Sergeant. Delgado grabbed her arm after the briefing. Are you crazy? That is the Ghost's hunting ground. Nobody survives that route without luck or angels. Why did you not fight it? Yara looked at him, and for a moment something flickered behind her careful mask. Some battles are not won with words, Tomas. He stared at her. What does that even mean? She did not answer. She simply walked back to the warehouse to prepare her gear, leaving Delgado standing in the hallway with a question he did not know how to ask and an answer she was not ready to give. The sun had not yet broken the horizon when Yara joined the morning formation for physical training. She positioned herself at the edge of the group, close enough to be counted but far enough to avoid conversation. The desert air carried the particular chill that came before dawn in Diyala province, a cold that would burn away within hours and leave nothing but heat and dust and the constant threat of violence. Staff Sergeant Maureen Kettner fell in a step beside her as the formation began its run around the perimeter of the FOB. Kettner was military police, 31 years old, with the kind of reputation that made junior soldiers straighten their spines when she walked past. She had fought for every inch of respect she owned, and she wore it like armor. Heard you got tagged for the Tampa run, Kettner said, her breathing steady despite the pace. Hendricks is doing? Yara kept her eyes forward. Does it matter? It matters if you let him put you in a box you do not belong in. Kettner's voice carried the weight of experience. I have been watching you, Okonkwo. 3 months now. You move different than the other supply clerks. You see things they do not see. And you never talk about your life before you enlisted. Nothing to talk about. Kettner laughed, a short, sharp sound. Everyone has something to talk about. The question is whether they are hiding from it or protecting it. They ran in silence for another quarter mile, boots pounding packed earth in rhythm with 40 other soldiers. The guard towers passed on their left, manned by soldiers who looked half asleep and fully bored. Yara noted the blind spots in their coverage without meaning to. Old habits that refused to die, no matter how hard she tried to bury them. I was the first female MP in my duty station, Kettner said finally. They put me on desk duty for 6 months. Said I was not ready for patrol. Said I needed more training. What they meant was they did not want me out there proving I could do the job they said I could not do. What changed? Kettner smiled, and there was something fierce in it. I stopped waiting for permission. Started being who I was whether they liked it or not. Took 2 years before they respected me. Took another year before they trusted me. But I earned every bit of it, and nobody can take that away. The formation slowed as they approached the starting point. Kettner peeled off toward the MP station, but she paused long enough to look back at Yara. Whatever you are hiding, she said, it is going to come out eventually. The only question is whether it comes out on your terms or someone else's. Yara watched her go, the words settling into her chest like stones. The intelligence briefing was held in a plywood building that smelled like dust and old coffee. Captain Drummond stood at the front with a map of Diyala province pinned to the wall behind him. Red markers dotted the roads like drops of blood, each one representing an attack, an IED, a life lost or changed forever. Listen up, Drummond said, his voice cutting through the murmur of assembled soldiers. We have updated intel on the sniper operating along Route Tampa. Command is calling him the Ghost of Diyala. 7 confirmed kills in the past 3 months. All long-range shots, all single rounds, all fatal. Nobody has seen him. Nobody has survived an encounter with a clear description. A soldier near the front raised his hand. What is the estimated range on his shots, sir? Drummond's jaw tightened. Longest confirmed was 1,400 meters. But intelligence suggests he may be capable of more. We're dealing with someone who knows what they are doing. Yara felt something shift in her chest. 1,400 meters was impressive for insurgent forces. It suggested training, patience, equipment that did not come from local markets. She found herself calculating sight lines, wind patterns, the way heat shimmer would affect bullet trajectory at that distance. The math came automatically like breathing. Delgado leaned over from the seat beside her. You okay? You look like you're somewhere else. Just thinking. About what? Yara did not answer. She was watching Drummond point to the stretch of Route Tampa, where their convoy would travel tomorrow. Abandoned buildings on both sides. Elevated positions with clear sight lines. A perfect hunting ground for someone who knew how to use distance as a weapon. The briefing ended with warnings about vigilance and prayers for safety. Soldiers filed out talking about the ghost in hushed voices, trading theories about who he was and where he came from. Some said he was former Iraqi military. Others claimed he was foreign, trained in Syria or Iran. Nobody knew the truth, and the mystery only made him more terrifying. Yara returned to the supply warehouse to find chaos. An armorer named Specialist Brennan was arguing with Delgado about a shipment of rifle components, his voice rising with frustration. I'm telling you, these buffer springs are wrong. They sent us carbine specs, but we ordered rifle length. Someone at Depot screwed up, and now we have 300 useless parts. Delgado threw his hands up. I do not know what to tell you, man. I just processed the paperwork. Talk to someone who knows weapons. Yara moved past them toward her workstation, but something caught her eye. She stopped, looked at the springs scattered across the table, and picked one up. These are not wrong, she said quietly. Brennan turned to her with the expression of a man who had just been interrupted by a child. Excuse me? Yara held up the spring, her fingers finding the measurement points automatically. These are rifle length. The markings are just worn. See here, the coil count is correct. Carbine springs have fewer coils and a different wire diameter. These are exactly what you ordered. Brennan stared at her. How do you know that? The question hung in the air. Delgado was watching her with new interest, his earlier curiosity sharpening into something more focused. Yara realized she had made a mistake, revealed knowledge that a supply specialist should not possess. She shrugged and set the spring down. Lucky guess. That was not a guess, Brennan said slowly. That was someone who knows weapons. Who are you? I am the blanket counter. Ask Sergeant Hendricks. She walked away before he could ask anything else, but she felt their eyes on her back. The mask she had worn for 19 months was starting to crack, and she did not know how to repair it. That night, alone in her quarters, Yara pulled a photograph from beneath her mattress. Her mother's face smiled up at her, frozen in a moment before the cancer had stolen everything. The pendant around Yara's neck had belonged to her, a small gold circle with a prayer inscribed in Igbo. "Promise me," her mother had said in those final days. "Promise me you will come home safe. Promise me you will not take risks. Promise me you will live." Yara had promised. She had chosen supply over infantry, paperwork over patrols, safety over the thing she was born to do. And every day since, she had felt the weight of that choice pressing down on her chest like a stone she could not move. She touched the pendant and whispered words her mother would never hear. The convoy briefing the next morning confirmed what Yara already knew. Route Tampa, 6 vehicles, high-value supply run. And somewhere along that road, a ghost was waiting with a rifle and patience and the certainty that his next target would never see him coming. Kittner found her before the vehicles loaded. The MP handed her a sidearm magazine with a look that said more than words could. "Just in case," Kittner said. "Stay in your vehicle. Stay down. And if everything goes wrong, you run. Understood?" Yara took the magazine and nodded. Understood. But understanding and obeying were different things. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the promises and the grief and the 19 months of pretending, something was beginning to wake up. The convoy staging area buzzed with controlled chaos as soldiers prepared vehicles for the morning run. Yara moved through the motor pool with her clipboard, checking manifests against cargo while mechanics performed final inspections on armored trucks that had seen better days. The smell of diesel and gun oil hung thick in the air, mixing with the tension that preceded every mission outside the wire. She paused beside the third vehicle in the lineup, watching a young specialist struggle with the elevation mechanism on a mounted M240 machine gun. The weapon was tilted wrong, the traverse limited by an adjustment screw that someone had over-tightened. In a firefight, that mistake could mean the difference between suppressing an enemy position and watching a round sail harmlessly over their heads. Yara glanced around. No one was watching. She reached up, loosened the screw with 3 precise turns, and tested the elevation. Smooth now, full range of motion restored. The specialist stared at her. "How did you know how to do that?" "Your traverse was binding." She kept her voice flat, uninterested. "Seen it before." She walked away before he could ask follow-up questions, but the interaction left her unsettled. These small moments kept accumulating, each one a crack in the facade she had built so carefully. Sooner or later, the cracks would connect, and everything she had hidden would come spilling out. Sergeant First Class Hendricks appeared from the motor pool office, clipboard in hand and satisfaction in his eyes. He found Yara near the supply truck and made a show of checking his paperwork. "Good news, Okonkwo. I reviewed the vehicle assignments and made some changes. You're going to be riding in the gunner position on truck 4. Yara looked at the vehicle he indicated. It was the oldest truck in the convoy, armor plating scarred from previous engagements, the gunner's turret offering minimal protection. The position was exposed, dangerous, and completely inappropriate for a supply specialist with no combat training. "That is a combat position," she said carefully. "I am non-combat MOS." Hendricks smiled. "Consider it cross-training. Besides, we are short on personnel. Everyone has to contribute. Unless you want to tell Captain Drummond that you are refusing an assignment?" The trap was elegant in its cruelty. Refuse and face disciplinary action. Accept and ride into ambush territory in the most vulnerable position available. Hendricks had found a way to punish her that looked like standard procedure on paper. "I will take the position," Yara said. Something flickered in Hendricks's expression, disappointment perhaps that she had not given him the confrontation he wanted. He turned and walked away without another word. Delgado found her an hour later, sitting on a crate behind the warehouse with her head in her hands. He dropped down beside her and offered a packet of crackers from an MRE. "Heard about the gunner assignment," he said. "That is messed up, even for Hendricks." Yara took the crackers but did not open them. "It is fine." "It is not fine. You are supply. You should be riding inside with the cargo, not standing in a turret waiting to get shot." He shook his head. "I do not understand why you do not fight back. You just take everything he throws at you like it does not matter. Because it does not matter. Not the way he thinks it does." Delgado was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question she had been dreading. "Yara, who were you before you enlisted? And do not tell me nothing. I have seen you handle weapons. I have seen you look at terrain like you're planning something. You're not just a supply clerk who got lucky with her ASFOB scores. She turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time since they had started working together. Tomas Delgado, 23 years old, from Bayamon, Puerto Rico, with a mother who sent care packages every month and a little sister who wanted to join the army, just like her big brother. He was kind and loud and completely incapable of keeping a secret, which meant she could never tell him the truth. My father taught me things, she said finally. Before he died, he was particular about weapons, about precision. Some of it stuck. What kind of things? The kind that do not matter anymore. She stood up and walked toward the convoy staging area, leaving Delgado with his questions and his crackers and the growing certainty that the woman he worked with was not who she pretended to be. The afternoon passed in final preparations. Yara checked her equipment 3 times, memorized the convoy route, and studied the terrain maps until the contours burned into her memory. Route Tampa wound through 16 kilometers of hostile territory, past abandoned villages and elevated ridgelines that offered perfect positions for a patient shooter. She found herself calculating angles without meaning to. If she were the ghost, where would she set up? The minaret in the village at kilometer 9 offered excellent elevation and concealment. The ridgeline at kilometer 12 provided multiple escape routes. The overpass at kilometer 14 created a natural choke point where vehicles would slow. Stop it, she told herself. You're not a shooter anymore. You are cargo. But the calculations continued anyway, running in the background of her mind like software she could not uninstall. That evening, she slipped away from the FOB through a gap in the wire that the guards pretended not to notice. 100 meters out, hidden behind a sand berm, someone had set up a makeshift range with steel targets at various distances. It was technically unauthorized, but command looked the other way because soldiers needed to blow off steam and burning ammunition was cheaper than therapy. Yara had discovered the range 3 weeks after arriving at Warhorse. She came here when the weight of pretending became too heavy, when her fingers ached for the familiar discipline of trigger and breath and follow-through. Tonight she did not shoot. She simply sat in the darkness and looked at the targets, silver shapes glinting under starlight at distances she could estimate to the meter without conscious thought. 400 meters to the closest. 800 to the farthest. Child's play for someone who had once put rounds through targets at 2,000 meters while her father watched with pride. She touched her mother's pendant and whispered the prayer inscribed on its surface. Keep me safe. Bring me home. Let me live. Tomorrow she would ride into the ghost's hunting ground in an exposed turret with a weapon she was not supposed to know how to use. Tomorrow everything could change. She returned to the FOB and found her way to the arms room, where weapons for the convoy were staged for morning distribution. Most of the rifles were standard M4 carbines, workhorses of the infantry. But in the corner, mounted on a rack by itself, sat something different. The Barrett M82 was a 50 caliber anti-material rifle capable of reaching out past 2,000 meters with devastating accuracy. It was not assigned to the convoy, just stored here awaiting transport to a sniper unit somewhere else in the province. Yara approached it slowly, the way someone might approach a sleeping predator. Her hand reached out before she could stop herself, fingers brushing the cold metal of the barrel, tracing the familiar lines of a weapon she had not touched in years. You know what that is? She spun around. A supply sergeant she did not recognize stood in the doorway, watching her with mild curiosity. It is a rifle, Yara said. The sergeant laughed. That is not just a rifle, specialist. That is a Barrett 50 cal reach out and touch someone from a mile and a half away. He shook his head. Beautiful weapon. Shame it is just passing through. Yara nodded and walked past him into the night, her heart pounding against her ribs. Tomorrow. Everything would happen tomorrow. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath the promises and the fear and the 19 months of pretending to be ordinary, something that had been sleeping for a very long time was finally beginning to stir. Dawn arrived with the color of dried blood spreading across the horizon. Yara stood beside Truck 4 in full battle rattle, helmet strapped tight, body armor pressing against her chest like a warning. Around her, soldiers performed final checks with the quiet efficiency of people who understood that mistakes made now could not be corrected later. Delgado approached from the supply truck where he would ride inside with the cargo. His usual chatter was absent, replaced by something that looked like fear wearing a thin disguise of professionalism. "Hey," he said, "be careful out there." Yara adjusted the strap on her helmet. "You too. I mean it." He lowered his voice. "I have a bad feeling about this run. The ghost has been quiet for 2 weeks. That means he is planning something. Or it means he moved on to different hunting grounds." Delgado shook his head. "Guys like that do not move on. They wait. They watch. And when everyone starts to relax, that is when they strike." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small figurine, a plastic saint with chipped paint and a serene expression. "My mother sent this. Said it would keep me safe. I want you to have it for the drive." Yara looked at the figurine, then at Delgado's earnest face. She thought about refusing, about maintaining the distance she had cultivated so carefully. But something in his eyes stopped her. "Thank you, Tomas." She tucked the saint into her vest pocket and climbed into the turret of Truck 4. The gunner's position offered a 360-degree view of the surrounding terrain, which meant she could see threats coming from any direction. It also meant threats could see her. The convoy rolled out at 0630, 6 vehicles stretching along the road like vertebrae in a spine made of steel and determination. Yara stood in her turret with her hands on the M240, scanning the terrain with eyes that saw more than they should. The buildings of FOB Warhorse shrank behind them, replaced by the endless brown expanse of Dayala Province. Route Tampa unfolded ahead like a ribbon of danger. The road had been paved once, but years of explosions and neglect had reduced it to a patchwork of asphalt and craters. Their vehicles bounced and swayed, maintaining the irregular spacing designed to minimize casualties from IED strikes. Yara watched the terrain scroll past and felt her mind shifting into a mode she had not used in years. Every ridgeline became a potential firing position. Every abandoned building became a hide site. Every shadow became a threat. 3 kilometers out, she spotted something wrong. A patch of disturbed earth beside the road, too regular to be natural, too fresh to be old. She keyed her radio. "Lead vehicle, this is Truck 4. Possible IED marker at 2 o'clock, 40 meters ahead. Recommend we divert to secondary route." Static. Then the convoy commander's voice, skeptical. "Truck 4, what is your basis for that assessment?" Yara hesitated. The truth was that she recognized the pattern from training she was not supposed to have received, from instincts she was not supposed to possess. But she could not say that over an open radio channel. Ground disturbance consistent with burial activity. Discoloration suggests recent digging. Request we err on caution. A long pause. Then the commander's voice again. "All vehicles, divert to secondary route. Good eye, Truck 4. The convoy shifted course, swinging wide around the suspicious patch of earth. As they passed, Yara saw the glint of wire barely visible beneath the sand. Her call had been right. Someone had been waiting for them. Master Sergeant Roland Vick's voice came over the radio from the lead vehicle. "Truck 4, who made that call?" "Specialist Okonkwo, supply section." Another pause, longer this time. "Copy that." Yara felt eyes on her from the vehicles ahead and behind. She had just done something a supply clerk should not be able to do, and people were starting to notice. The convoy continued through increasingly hostile terrain. Abandoned villages appeared on either side of the road, their empty windows staring like hollow eyes. Yara tracked each potential threat with growing unease. The ghost was out here somewhere. She could feel it in the way the silence pressed against her ears, in the way the shadows seemed to watch their passage with patient hunger. 11 kilometers into the route, Private First Class Wilder's voice crackled over the radio from the vehicle behind her. "Truck 4, you doing okay up there?" Yara glanced back and saw Wilder in the gunner position of Truck 5, his young face tight with anxiety. He had been assigned to the convoy at the last minute, another body to fill another position. She remembered him struggling with that crate in the warehouse, remembered the gratitude in his eyes when she helped him. Doing fine, Wilder. Keep your eyes on your sector. Copy that. Hey, Okonkwo. Thanks for what you did back at the warehouse. Nobody else would have helped me. Focus on the mission, private. But she allowed herself a small moment of connection, a brief acknowledgement that even in this place of death and danger, human kindness still mattered. The convoy approached kilometer 14, where an overpass created a natural choke point. Yara felt her instincts screaming as the vehicle slowed to navigate the narrow passage. This was exactly where she would set up if she were hunting a convoy. Elevation, concealment, multiple escape routes. She scanned the overpass, the buildings beyond, the ridgeline to the east. Nothing visible. But that meant nothing when dealing with someone who had earned the name Ghost. They passed through the choke point without incident. Yara's shoulders did not relax. 15 kilometers. 16. The FOB at the end of the route appeared on the horizon, a smudge of concrete and wire that promised safety. The convoy commander announced they were entering the final approach. And that was when Yara saw it. A glint of light from a minaret in the village to their left. Brief, almost invisible, the kind of reflection that could be glass or metal or nothing at all. But Yara knew what it was. She had made the same mistake once, years ago, when sunlight caught her scope and gave away her position during a competition. She keyed her radio to warn the convoy. The first RPG hit Truck 2 before she could finish the sentence. The explosion was a physical force that slammed against her chest and filled the world with fire and noise. Truck 2 lurched sideways, smoke pouring from its engine compartment. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions in the village, muzzle flashes winking from windows and rooftops like deadly fireflies. The convoy scattered into chaos. Vehicles swerved, soldiers shouted, rounds cracked through the air with the sound of death passing close. Yara grabbed the M240 and returned fire toward the nearest muzzle flash, her hands finding the rhythm of combat without conscious thought. But even as she fired, her eyes kept returning to that minaret. The Ghost was up there. She was certain of it, and he was just getting started. The world became a symphony of violence. Rounds snapped overhead, punching through metal and shattering glass. The M240 bucked in Yara's hands as she returned fire toward the muzzle flashes in the village, her body moving through the mechanics of combat while her mind raced through calculations she had no business making. Truck 2 was burning. She could see soldiers scrambling from the wreckage, dragging wounded comrades toward cover behind the disabled vehicle. The convoy had fragmented into isolated pockets of resistance, each vehicle fighting its own desperate battle against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. A round sparked off the turret ring inches from her face. Yara ducked instinctively, then forced herself back up. Hiding meant dying. Movement meant survival. She traversed the M240 and sent a burst toward a rooftop where she had spotted movement, watching the figures scatter. The radio exploded with overlapping voices. Contact left. Contact right. Truck 2 is down. We need medevac. Where is the fire coming from? Everyone was shouting, and no one was listening, and the chaos was exactly what an ambush was designed to create. Then she heard it. A single shot, different from the others. Heavier, more deliberate. The distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle firing from distance. The soldier in the turret of Truck 1 slumped forward and did not move. The Ghost had entered the fight. Yara's eyes snapped to the minaret. 1,800 meters, maybe more. The angle was wrong for her to see the shooter, but she could trace the trajectory from the impact. He was up there, patient and precise, picking off anyone who presented target. Another shot. Another soldier down, this one trying to reach the wounded from Truck 2. The Ghost was not just killing. He was controlling the battlefield, pinning them in place while the insurgent fighters closed the distance. Master Sergeant Vic's voice cut through the chaos on the radio. All elements, we are pinned by sniper fire from the northeast. That minaret. Does anyone have eyes on a shooter? Negative, came the responses. Negative. Negative. Yara had eyes on the position, but not the shooter. The Ghost was too well concealed, too professional. He would only expose himself for the split second it took to fire, then disappear back in a shadow. Hitting him would require anticipating his movement, predicting where he would appear before he appeared there. It would require being better than him. The driver of her truck screamed. Yara looked down to see blood spreading across his shoulder, a round having punched through the door. She dropped into the cabin, grabbed the first aid kit, and pressed gauze against the wound with one hand while the driver gasped in pain. "Stay with me," she said. "Pressure here. Do not let go." She climbed back into the turret and saw something that turned her blood to ice. Wilder's vehicle had been hit. Truck 5 sat at an angle in the road, smoke rising from its engine, and Wilder was trapped in the gunner's turret. She could see him struggling with something, his movements frantic. The turret mechanism had jammed, pinning him in place. He was completely exposed to the minaret. "Wilder, get down," she shouted into the radio. "Get out of the turret." "I cannot." His voice was high with panic. "The mount is stuck. I cannot move." Another crack from the distance. A round sparked off the armor plating of Truck 5, missing Wilder by inches. The ghost was toying with him, or maybe adjusting for wind. Either way, the next shot would not miss. Yara looked at the M240 in her hands. Effective range, maybe 800 meters with accuracy. The minaret was more than twice that distance. She could fire suppressive rounds, but they would fall short, accomplishing nothing except wasting ammunition. Then she remembered. The Barrett, the .50 caliber rifle she had touched in the arms room. It was being transported in this convoy, secured in Truck 3. Truck 3, which had stopped 30 meters away, its crew taking cover behind the engine block. The rifle that could reach out past 2,000 meters. The rifle she was not authorized to use. The rifle that could save Wilder's life. Sergeant Vic's voice came over the radio again. "We need to neutralize that sniper, or we are all dead. Does anyone have a solution?" Silence. No one had an answer. The ghost had them pinned, and he knew it. Yara made her decision. She dropped from the turret and hit the ground running. Rounds kicked up dust around her feet as insurgent fighters tried to track her movement. She zigzagged between vehicles, using the armored trucks as cover, her body low and fast. Someone shouted her name. She ignored it. Truck 3 loomed ahead. She slid behind its bulk, breathing hard, and found the cargo compartment. The Barrett was secured in a transit case, locked with a simple padlock that was never meant to stop a determined soldier. She grabbed a rock from the ground and smashed the lock with 3 hard strikes. The case fell open. The rifle lay inside like a sleeping predator. Black metal and precision engineering, a weapon designed for one purpose and one purpose only. Yara lifted it with hands that remembered exactly how this weight should feel. She grabbed a magazine from the case, slammed it home, and chambered around. "Specialist, what are you doing?" She turned to find Sergeant Vic staring at her from behind the truck's engine block. His face was a mixture of confusion and something else, something that might have been hope. "Ending this," Yara said. She moved to the front of the truck and dropped into a prone position, the Barrett's bipod digging into the sand. The minaret filled her scope 1,847 meters away, according to her mental calculation. Wind from the east, maybe 8 miles per hour. Temperature differential, creating heat shimmer that would affect the bullet's path. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Breathe. Calculate. Trust yourself." She exhaled slowly and put her eye to the scope. The ghost was still invisible, but she knew where he would appear. The same window he had been using, the only angle that gave him coverage of the kill zone. He would fire again soon, probably at Wilder, and when he did, he would expose himself for exactly 1 second. 1 second was enough. Wilder's panicked voice crackled over the radio. "Someone help me. Please. I do not want to die out here." Yara's finger rested on the trigger. She waited, and in the minaret, a shadow began to move. Time stretched like taffy in the August heat. Yara watched through the scope as the shadow in the minaret resolved into shape and form. A man, a rifle, the ghost of Diala preparing to take another life. Her breathing slowed to a rhythm her body remembered, even if her mind had tried to forget. For seconds in, hold. For seconds out. The crosshairs steady despite the chaos erupting around her. Somewhere behind her, soldiers were shouting and dying and fighting for survival. None of it mattered. The entire world had collapsed into the space between her eye and the target 1,847 meters away. The ghost shifted position. His rifle barrel emerged from the window, tracking toward Truck 5. Toward Wilder. Yara made her first calculation. Wind speed had increased. 9 miles per hour now, maybe 10. At this distance, that meant adjusting her aim point nearly 3 feet to the right. The bullet would take almost 3 seconds to reach the target, an eternity during which the wind could shift again. She adjusted. The ghost settled into his firing position. She could see him clearly now through the magnification. Calm, professional, a man who had killed 7 soldiers and felt nothing but satisfaction in his craft. He was good. She could tell from the way he moved, the economy of motion, the patience. But her father had been better, and she had been better than her father. The ghost's finger moved toward his trigger. Yara fired first. The Barrett roared, a thunderclap of sound and fury that announced her presence to everyone on the battlefield. The recoil slammed into her shoulder with brutal force. The muzzle blast kicked up a cloud of dust that momentarily obscured her vision. She did not need to see. She knew. The round crossed 1,800 meters in 2.7 seconds, fighting wind and gravity and the desperate physics of long-range shooting. It entered the minaret window at an angle of 6 degrees, passed through a gap in the crumbling concrete exactly 4 inches wide, and found its target. The ghost of Diala died before he heard the shot that killed him. Silence fell over the battlefield. Not true silence, but the stunned pause that follows the impossible. Insurgent fighters who had been advancing on the convoy positions stopped, confused by the sudden loss of their overwatch. The constant crack of the ghost's rifle had been their confidence, their assurance that the Americans were trapped and helpless. Now that assurance was gone, Yara chambered another round and scanned for secondary targets. A fighter emerged from a doorway 300 meters away, AK-47 raised. She put a round through his chest before he could fire. Another appeared on a rooftop. She dropped him with the same cold efficiency. The insurgents broke. Without their sniper, without their tactical advantage, they scattered into the village like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The convoy soldiers, sensing the shift, pressed their advantage with renewed aggression. It was over in 4 minutes. Yara lowered the Barrett and rested her forehead against the warm metal of the receiver. Her hands were steady. They always were, during and immediately after. The shaking would come later, in private, where no one could see the cost of what she had done. Specialist Okonkwo. She looked up. Master Sergeant Vic stood over her, his face a map of emotions she could not quite read. Behind him, other soldiers had gathered, staring at her like she had grown a second head. That shot, Vic said slowly. The minaret. How far was that? 1,847 meters. Give or take. Vic turned to look at the distant tower, then back at her. Through a 4-inch gap. Invariable wind. First round hit. Yes, Sergeant. The silence stretched. Yara became aware of how she must look. A supply specialist covered in dust and sweat, prone behind a 50 caliber rifle she had no authorization to touch, having just made a shot that most trained snipers would struggle to replicate. Who the hell are you? Vic asked. Before she could answer, Delgado pushed through the gathered soldiers. He dropped to his knees beside her, his face pale, his eyes wide. Yara. What? I mean, he could not form a complete sentence. That was... You just... How? She sat up slowly, the Barrett heavy across her lap. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind the familiar emptiness that followed violence. She had killed 3 men in the past 5 minutes. The math of it settled into her chest like stones. Wilder, she said. Is he okay? Delgado nodded, still speechless. Someone had freed him from the jammed turret. He was shaken but unharmed, alive because a supply clerk had made an impossible shot from nearly 2 kilometers away. Vic crouched down to her level. His voice was quieter now, meant only for her. I asked you a question, specialist. Who trained you to shoot like that? Yara looked at him, and for the first time in 19 months, she told the truth. My father was a competitive shooter. National level. He started teaching me when I was 8 years old. By the time I was 12, I was better than him. By 15, I held 3 junior national records for long-range precision rifle. I qualified expert on every weapon system the Army offered during basic training. My drill sergeants wanted me for infantry. Recruiters from sniper schools contacted my command. Then why are you counting blankets in a supply warehouse? Yara touched the pendant beneath her body armor. Because my mother was dying, and she made me promise to stay safe, to come home, to choose life over what I was born to do. Vic was quiet for a long moment. Around them, soldiers were securing the area, treating wounded, calling for medevac. The ordinary business of survival after combat. Your mother, Vic said finally. What would she say about today? Yara looked toward Truck 5, where Wilder sat on the ground with a medic checking his vitals. The young soldier who had thanked her for helping with the crate. The kid who would have died in that turret if she had kept her promise. I think, Yara said slowly, she would understand that some promises are kept by breaking them. Vic stood and extended his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. We need to get moving, he said. Secure the convoy, reach the FOB, debrief. But specialist? He held her gaze. This is not over. Command is going to have questions. Division is going to have questions. And I suspect your days in supply are finished. Yara looked at the Barrett in her hands, at the soldiers staring at her with new eyes, at the minaret where the ghost of Diala had died. Yes, Sergeant, she said. I suspect they are. The medevac helicopters arrived 23 minutes after the last shot was fired. Yara sat apart from the other soldiers, the Barrett still across her lap, watching the organized chaos of casualty evacuation with eyes that saw everything and processed nothing. The adrenaline had fully drained from her system now, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that went deeper than muscle and bone. 2 soldiers wounded seriously, 4 others with minor injuries. 0 killed. 0 killed because she had done what she promised her mother she would never do. The convoy limped toward the forward operating base, with Truck 2 being towed and Truck 5 running on faith and fumes. Yara rode in the back of Truck 3 this time, no longer in a turret, no longer pretending to be something she was not. The soldiers around her kept stealing glances, their expressions mixing awe and uncertainty in equal measure. She ignored them. There would be time for questions later. Right now, she needed the silence. They reached the FOB as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed too beautiful for a day that had held so much violence. Word had already spread. Yara could see it in the faces of the soldiers who gathered to watch the convoy roll through the gates. They stared at her like she was a creature from legend, something that should not exist but somehow did. Staff Sergeant Kettner was waiting at the motor pool. She pushed through the gathering crowd and stopped in front of Yara, her expression unreadable. 1,800 meters, Kettner said, through a gap in concrete. In wind. Yes. Kettner shook her head slowly. I told you whatever you were hiding would come out eventually. I did not expect it to come out like this. Neither did I. They stood in silence for a moment, 2 women who understood what it meant to fight for space in a world that did not want to make room for them. Then Kettner did something unexpected. She pulled Yara into a brief, fierce embrace. You saved lives today, Kettner whispered. Do not let anyone make you feel bad about that. She released Yara and stepped back, her professional mask sliding back into place. Captain Drummond wants to see you. Debrief in 30 minutes. I suggest you clean up first. Yara nodded and walked toward the barracks, acutely aware of the eyes following her every step. The face in the mirror looked like a stranger. Dust and sweat had mixed into a grime that covered her skin like camouflage. Her eyes held something new, something that had not been there this morning. She had spent 19 months trying to bury the person she used to be. In the space of a few minutes, that person had clawed her way back to the surface. She washed her face, changed her uniform, and touched her mother's pendant one last time before heading to the command building. The debrief was held in Captain Drummond's office, a cramped space that smelled like coffee and stress. Master Sergeant Vic was already there, along with a lieutenant Yara did not recognize. They fell silent when she entered. Specialist Okonkwo, Drummond said. Sit down. She sat. Drummond leaned back in his chair and studied her with eyes that had seen too much and understood even more. I had been in the army for 18 years. I thought I had seen everything. He paused. I was wrong. Sir, I can explain. You do not need to explain. Vic already gave me the rundown. 3 confirmed kills, including the ghost of Diala. Range on the primary target was over 1,800 meters. He shook his head. Do you understand how exceptional that is? Yara said nothing. She understood better than anyone in the room. What I need to know, Drummond continued, is why a soldier with your abilities has been hiding in my supply section for over a year. Why did you not pursue a combat MOS? Why did you not apply for sniper school? Why did you let Hendricks treat you like garbage when you could shoot circles around anyone on this base? The question hung in the air. Yara felt the weight of it pressing against her chest, demanding an answer she had never spoken aloud to anyone except Vic in the aftermath of the ambush. I made a promise, she said quietly, to my mother. She was dying, and she was afraid. Afraid that I would go to war and not come back. She made me swear that I would stay safe, that I would choose a job that kept me away from combat, that I would come home to her. She's gone now. 14 months ago. Yara touched the pendant. This was hers. The room was silent. Even the lieutenant, who had been taking notes, stopped writing. Drummond's voice was gentler when he spoke again. And today? What changed? There was a 19-year-old kid trapped in a turret with a sniper zeroing in on him. Yara met Drummond's eyes. He reminded me of why I joined the army in the first place. Not to be safe. To keep others safe. My mother would not have wanted me to let him die. Not for a promise. Not for anything. Drummond nodded slowly. He picked up a folder from his desk and opened it. Division has already been in contact. Word travels fast when someone drops a ghost. They want to talk to you about reassignment. Designated marksman program. Maybe more, depending on how the conversation goes. Yara's heart rate increased despite her efforts to remain calm. And what do you recommend, sir? I recommend you stop hiding from who you are. Drummond closed the folder. You have a gift, specialist. A rare one. Using it is not a betrayal of your mother's memory. Wasting it would be. The words settled into her chest, filling spaces that had been empty for too long. She thought about her mother's face in those final days, the fear in her eyes, the desperate grip of her fingers. But she also thought about Wilder, about the soldiers who had made it home because she had picked up that rifle. Some promises were kept by breaking them, and some gifts were too important to hide. What happens now, sir? Now you get some rest. Tomorrow, Division sends a representative to discuss your future. Drummond stood and extended his hand. Whatever you decide, Okonkwo, it has been an honor having you in my command, even if I did not know who you really were. Yara shook his hand. Thank you, sir. She left the office and stepped into the cooling evening air. The FOB was quieter now, soldiers settling into the routines of night. But as she walked toward the barracks, she saw a familiar figure sitting on a concrete barrier near the supply warehouse. Delgado stood when he saw her approach. He looked like he had been waiting for hours. So he said, National shooting champion, huh? Junior champion. There's a difference. He laughed, a sound that broke something loose in her chest. She found herself laughing too, the tension of the day finally releasing in a way she had not expected. You know, Delgado said, I always knew there was something different about you. I just figured you were like really into spreadsheets or something. Yara smiled. A real smile. Perhaps the first one she had allowed herself since arriving at Warhorse. Sorry to disappoint. Disappoint? He shook his head. Yara, you killed the ghost of Diala from almost 2 kilometers away. You saved Wilder's life. You saved everyone's life. He paused. I'm just mad you never told me you were secretly a superhero. Not a superhero, just someone who stopped pretending to be ordinary. Delgado studied her face in the fading light. And now, what happens to the woman who counted blankets with me for 19 months? She becomes someone else, Yara said. Someone she should have been all along. The stars were emerging overhead, distant points of light in an endless darkness. Yara looked up at them and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Sergeant First Class Hendricks heard the news while cleaning his weapon in the motor pool. A private had come running with the story, breathless and wide-eyed, talking about the supply clerk who had killed the ghost from almost 2 kilometers away. Hendricks had laughed at first, certain it was a joke. Then more soldiers arrived with the same story, and the laughter died in his throat. He spent the evening in his quarters, replaying every interaction he had ever had with Specialist Okonkwo. Every insult, every dismissal, every time he had called her worthless, non-combat, a waste of a deployment slot. The woman he had mocked for counting blankets had made a shot that would become legend in Diyala province. The woman he had assigned to an exposed turret position as punishment had used that position to save the entire convoy. Hendricks stared at the ceiling and felt something unfamiliar crawling through his chest. It took him a long time to recognize it as shame. Morning came with the arrival of a Black Hawk helicopter carrying division representatives. Yara watched from the supply warehouse doorway as 2 officers and a sergeant major stepped onto the landing pad, their uniforms crisp and their faces serious. Captain Drummond met them with salutes and handshakes, then led them toward the command building. Delgado appeared beside her, coffee in hand. "You ready for this?" "No." He nodded as if this was the only reasonable answer. "For what it is worth, I think you should take whatever they offer. You're too good to be stuck here with me and the blankets." "I like the blankets." Delgado smiled. "The blankets liked you too, but they will understand if you need to move on." The summons came an hour later. Yara walked to the command building with her heart beating a rhythm she could not control. The conference room was small, dominated by a table where the division representatives sat alongside Captain Drummond and Master Sergeant Vic. "Specialist Okonkwo," the sergeant major said. "Please sit." She sat. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of questions and assessments. They asked about her training, her competition history, her qualification scores. They asked why she had hidden her abilities and listened without judgment when she explained about her mother. They showed her evaluations from drill sergeants who had identified her potential years ago, recommendations that had been filed and forgotten when she chose supply over combat arms. Finally, the senior officer, a lieutenant colonel with silver eagles on his collar, leaned forward. "Here is what we are offering, Specialist. Immediate reclassification to 11 Bravo with a slot in the designated marksman program. Upon completion, assignment to a unit that can actually use your skills." He paused. "We do not get shooters like you very often. The Army would be foolish to waste what you can do." Yara looked at the paperwork in front of her. A new MOS. A new path. A complete departure from the promise she had made to a dying woman in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and grief. "Can I have time to think about it?" The lieutenant colonel nodded. 24 hours. "But Specialist?" He held her gaze. "I hope you make the right choice. For yourself, and for the soldiers who might need you someday." She left the conference room and found Hendricks waiting in the hallway. The sight of him triggered an automatic tension in her shoulders, a reflexive preparation for whatever cruelty he had come to deliver. But something was different about him today. His posture lacked its usual arrogance. His eyes could not quite meet hers. "Okonkwo," he said. His voice was rough, as if the words were being dragged out against their will. "I heard about what happened. The shot you made." Yara waited. Hendricks shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I have been in this army a long time. Seen a lot of soldiers. I thought I knew what a warrior looked like." He paused. "I was wrong about you." It was not an apology. Not exactly. But from a man like Hendricks, it was something close. Yara considered her response carefully. "You put me in that turret to punish me. To put me in danger because you did not think I belonged here. I know. If you had not done that, I would have been inside the vehicle. I would not have seen the ghost. I would not have been in position to take the shot." Hendricks looked up, confusion flickering across his face. "Wilder would be dead," Yara continued. "Maybe others too. Your cruelty put me exactly where I needed to be." She let that sink in. "I am not thanking you. But I'm telling you that sometimes the worst thing someone does to us becomes the best thing that happens to us." She walked past him without waiting for a response. That night, Yara returned to the makeshift range outside the wire. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by city lights, ancient and indifferent to the struggles of the humans beneath them. She did not bring a weapon this time. She just sat in the sand, and looked at the targets, she could no longer pretend she did not know how to hit. Her mother's face came to her unbidden. Not the gaunt face of her final days, but the vibrant face from childhood. The face that had watched with quiet pride when Yara brought home her first trophy. The face that had worried when her daughter's gift became apparent, knowing what it might someday cost. "Mama," Yara whispered to the darkness. I tried so hard to be what you wanted, to be safe, to hide from what I am, but I cannot do it anymore." The wind carried her words away into the night. "I saved lives today, good lives, young lives, and I can save more if I stop pretending." She touched the pendant at her throat. "I know you were afraid. I know you wanted me to come home, but I think you would understand. I think you would want me to be who I was born to be." The stars offered no answer, but Yara felt something shift in her chest. A weight lifting, a door opening, the permission she had been waiting for, granted not by her mother's ghost, but by her own understanding of what her mother's love had truly meant. "Keep me safe," the pendant said. But maybe safe did not mean hiding. Maybe safe meant being strong enough to protect herself and others. Maybe safe meant finally becoming whole. She returned to the FOB and went straight to the command building. The duty officer looked surprised to see her at this hour. "I need to speak with Captain Drummond," Yara said. "I have made my decision." The officer hesitated. "It is late, Specialist. Can it wait until morning?" "No." Yara shook her head. "I have waited long enough already." Captain Drummond signed the paperwork at 0600 the next morning. Yara watched the pen move across the page, each stroke erasing the person she had pretended to be and creating someone new. Specialist Okonkwo, supply section, ceased to exist. In her place stood a soldier finally authorized to be what she had always been. The reclassification was expedited given the circumstances. Division wanted her operational as quickly as possible, which meant abbreviated training and immediate integration into a security detail operating out of FOB Warhorse. She would serve as designated marksman for a team running high-value escort missions through Diyala Province. Her new team leader was a staff sergeant named Colvin, a compact man with watchful eyes and a reputation for bringing his people home alive. He studied her qualification records with an expression that shifted from skepticism to interest to something approaching respect. "The ghost kill was not a fluke," Colvin said. "These scores go back years." "No, Sergeant. It was not a fluke." Colvin set down the folder. "I do not care where you came from or why you were hiding in supply. What I care about is whether you can perform when my team needs you. Can you do that?" "Yes, Sergeant." He held her gaze for a long moment, searching for doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he nodded. "Then welcome to the team, Okonkwo. We roll out in 4 hours. Gear up." The next 3 days passed in a blur of missions and movements. Yara found her place in the team's rhythm, her skills slotting into their operations like a key into a lock. She provided overwatch from rooftops and vehicle positions, her scope sweeping for threats while her teammates conducted their work below. She did not fire a shot in combat during those first missions, but her presence changed the equation. The team moved with more confidence, knowing that someone was watching over them with eyes that missed nothing. On the 4th day, everything changed. They were escorting a convoy of Iraqi officials through a stretch of road that had seen heavy insurgent activity. Yara was positioned in the lead vehicle, scanning the terrain through her scope, when she spotted movement in a building 300 meters ahead. "Contact front," she called over the radio. "Second floor window, north side. I count 3 armed individuals." The convoy slowed. Colvin's voice came back calm and controlled. "Can you confirm hostile intent?" Yara watched through her scope as one of the figures lifted an RPG launcher onto his shoulder. "Confirmed. RPG. Take the shot." She exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The first insurgent dropped. She shifted aim, acquired the second target, fired again. The third man tried to run. He made it 2 steps before her third round found him. Threats neutralized. The convoy rolled through without further incident. The Iraqi officials never knew how close they had come to dying on that stretch of road. They arrived at their destination safely, shook hands with American commanders, and returned home to their families. That night, Cole then found Yara cleaning her rifle in the team's quarters. 3 shots, 3 kills, he said. No hositashchin. He sat down across from her. When Division told me they were sending a supply clerk to be my marksman, I thought someone was playing a joke. I was wrong. I get that a lot. Cole then almost smiled. The team respects you. That is not easy to earn this fast. He paused. I heard the story about the ghost, about why you were hiding in supply, about your mother. Yara's hands stilled on the rifle. Word travels. It does. Cole then leaned forward. I lost my father when I was 19. He made me promise to take care of my mother. I thought that meant giving up my dreams, staying home, being safe. He shook his head. Took me years to understand that taking care of her meant becoming someone she could be proud of, someone who made her sacrifice worth something. Yara looked at him, seeing something familiar in his eyes, an understanding that went beyond words. I think I'm starting to understand that too, she said quietly. Good, because we have another mission tomorrow. High-value target extraction. Intelligence says there may be hostile sniper activity in the area. Cole then stood. I need my marksman sharp. Get some rest. He left her alone with her rifle and her thoughts. The mission the following day took them deep into territory that had been contested for months. Yara rode with her team through streets that watched them with hostile eyes, her scope tracking rooftops and windows and shadows. The high-value target was a local leader who had been providing intelligence to coalition forces, and insurgents had put a price on his head. They reached the extraction point without contact. The target, a nervous man with glasses and trembling hands, climbed into the armored vehicle with palpable relief. The convoy turned for home. They were 2 kilometers from the FOB when Yara saw the glint. Sniper, she called out. Eleving Alklaki. Elevated position. Everyone down. The team reacted instantly, vehicles swerving, soldiers ducking. A round cracked through the space where the target's head had been a half-second earlier. Yara was already tracking. The enemy sniper was good, repositioning quickly, using cover effectively. But she had spent her whole life studying the geometry of distance and death. She knew where he would go before he went there. She waited. 1 breath. 2. The sniper emerged from cover to take another shot. Yara fired first. The round crossed 800 meters and found its mark. The sniper tumbled from his position and did not move again. Threat eliminated, Yara reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her system. Colvin's voice came back with something that sounded almost like awe. Outstanding, Conquo. Outstanding. The convoy completed its journey without further incident. The high-value target made it safely to the FOB, where he would continue providing intelligence that would save countless lives. Another mission complete. Another day of being exactly who she was supposed to be. Word spread quickly through the base. The supply clerk turned marksman had done it again. Soldiers who had barely noticed her existence 3 days ago now nodded with respect when she passed. The whispers followed her everywhere, but they were different now. Not mockery, not dismissal, admiration. Master Sergeant Vic found her in the chow hall that evening. He sat down across from her without asking permission. Division called, he said. They are impressed. He paused. They are also concerned. Concerned about what? Vic's expression was serious. The ghost had a brother, also a sniper, also trained, and word on the street is that he knows who killed his sibling. He leaned closer. You have a target on your back now, Okonkwo. The hunter has become the hunted. Yara absorbed this information with a calmness that surprised even herself. Let him come. Vic raised an eyebrow. You're not worried? She thought about the 19 months she had spent hiding. The fear that had driven her into shadows. The promise that had kept her small. I spent a long time being afraid of who I am, she said. I am done being afraid. If the ghost brother wants to find me, he knows where I will be. Right here, doing my job, being exactly who I was born to be. Vic studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. Good, he said, because we are counting on you. He stood and walked away, leaving Yara alone with her meal and her thoughts and the quiet certainty that whatever came next, she would face it standing up. The ghost's brother announced himself 3 days later. A patrol found the message nailed to a post outside the FOB's main gate. Arabic script on weathered paper, translated within the hour by the intelligence section. The woman who killed my brother will die the same way he died. Alone, at distance, without ever seeing the shot that ends her. Captain Drummond called an emergency briefing. The room was tense, officers and senior NCOs studying maps and intelligence reports while Yara sat in the corner and listened to people discuss her potential death. His name is Farid al-Rashid, the intelligence officer explained. Younger brother of the ghost. Trained in Syria alongside his sibling. Possibly more skilled, definitely more patient. He has been inactive for 2 years, but sources say he resurfaced the day after his brother was killed. What is his effective range? Cole then asked. Estimated 2,000 meters plus. He uses a Dragunov SVD, heavily modified. The intelligence officer paused. He killed a British sniper in Basra 3 years ago. Shot him through a 6-inch gap in a concrete barrier from 1,700 meters. The room absorbed this information in silence. Yara felt the weight of their glances, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Could she beat someone like that? Drummond turned to her. Specialist Okonkwo, Division has offered to relocate you to a safer position until this threat is neutralized. A desk job in the green zone. No shame in taking it. Yara stood slowly. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. With respect, sir, running away will not make him stop. He will wait. He will follow. And eventually he will find me when I'm not ready. She met Drummond's gaze. I would rather face him here on ground I know, with people I trust watching my back. Drummond studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. We increased security protocols. No solo movements outside hardened structures. Marksman positions will be rotated unpredictably. He looked around the room. This man wants to make an example of Specialist Okonkwo. We are not going to let that happen. The next week passed in a strange limbo of heightened alertness and forced normalcy. Yara continued her duties with Colvin's team, but every mission carried an additional weight. She scanned not just for immediate threats, but for the patient hunter who might be watching from a distance she could barely imagine. Delgado visited her quarters one evening, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a worried expression. You know this is crazy, right? He sat down on the footlocker across from her bunk. There is a professional killer out there specifically hunting you, and you're just walking around like it is a normal Tuesday. Every day has been a normal Tuesday for 19 months. Yara accepted the coffee. I spent all that time hiding from who I am, hiding from this exact situation. And you know what I learned? What? Hiding does not make you safe. It just makes you a different kind of target. She sipped the coffee. At least now I can shoot back. Delgado shook his head, but there was admiration mixed with his concern. You are either the bravest person I have ever met or the craziest. Maybe both. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 friends who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. The supply clerk and the designated marksman. The chatterbox and the quiet one. Different in every way that should have mattered, connected by something deeper than words. The attack came 2 days later. Yara was crossing the open ground between the command building and the motor pool when something made her stop. A feeling she could not explain, a whisper of instinct honed by years of training. She looked toward the perimeter, toward the distant hills beyond the wire. A glint of light, brief, almost invisible. She dove sideways as the round cracked through the space she had occupied. The shot missed her by inches, close enough that she felt the wind of its passage against her cheek. Contact, she screamed, rolling behind a concrete barrier as a second round sparked off the ground beside her. Sniper fire from the east. Everyone down. The FOB erupted into controlled chaos. Soldiers scrambled for cover while response teams mobilized. Yara pressed herself against the barrier, her heart pounding, her mind racing through calculations. The shot had come from outside the perimeter. Way outside. 1,500 meters at minimum, probably more. Farid had found a position that gave him line of sight into the FOB itself. A feat that should have been impossible given the terrain. But he had made a mistake. He had missed. and now she knew where he was. Cole then appeared beside her, breathing hard, rifle in hand. You hit? No. Yara was already moving, staying low, using cover. I need to get to the East Tower. I need elevation. Are you insane? He is zeroed on that approach. He is zeroed on where I was. Not where I am going to be. She met his eyes. Trust me. Cole then hesitated for half a second. Then he nodded. Go. I will provide covering fire. Yara moved. She had never run so fast in her life, zigzagging between barriers and vehicles, using every scrap of cover the FOB offered. Rounds cracked around her, Farid adjusting his aim, trying to track her unpredictable movement. But she was not giving him a pattern to predict. She reached the East Tower and climbed the ladder 3 rungs at a time. The guard position at the top held a mounted M24 sniper rifle, standard equipment for perimeter defense. She threw herself behind the weapon and swung it toward the distant hills. Through the scope, she found him. Farid al-Rashid lay prone on a ridgeline 1,900 meters away, his modified Dragunov tracking toward the tower. For one frozen moment, they looked at each other through their respective optics. Hunter and hunter, predator and predator. He fired first. The round struck the sandbag inches from her face, showering her with dust and debris. She did not flinch. Her father had trained that reflex out of her years ago, teaching her that flinching meant missing and missing meant dying. She exhaled slowly, calculated windage, elevation, the curve of the earth at this distance. Her finger found the trigger with the familiarity of 1,000 repetitions. Farid was already chambering another round, already adjusting his aim for the kill shot. Yara fired. 1,912 meters. The round flew true, fighting gravity and wind, crossing the impossible distance between them. Farid al-Rashid jerked once and was still. The ghost brother had come for revenge. He had found something else entirely. Yara lowered the rifle and pressed her forehead against the stock, breathing hard, her hands finally beginning to shake. The threat was over. The hunter had been hunted, and somewhere in the hills of Diyala province, another legend had ended at the hands of a woman they had labeled non-combat. She allowed herself one moment of stillness. Then she stood, climbed down from the tower, and walked back toward her team. There was still work to be done. The ceremony was held 3 days after Farid al-Rashid's body was recovered from the ridgeline. Division sent a colonel to officiate, a woman with silver hair and combat ribbons that stretched across her chest like a history of wars fought and won. 200 soldiers stood in formation under the Iraqi sun, watching as Specialist Yara Okonkwo walked to the front of the assembly. Captain Drummond read the citation aloud. His voice carried across the parade ground, describing actions that sounded like fiction but had happened less than a week ago. The elimination of the ghost of Diyala, the protection of coalition forces during the ambush, the neutralization of a second hostile sniper who had infiltrated FOB security. 3 engagements, 5 confirmed kills, 0 friendly casualties attributable to enemy sniper fire. The colonel stepped forward and pinned the Army Achievement Medal to Yara's uniform. The medal was small, barely noticeable against the fabric, but its weight felt enormous. Specialist Okonkwo, the colonel said quietly, for her ears alone. I have read your file. All of it. The competitions, the qualification scores, the 19 months in supply. She paused. I understand why you hid, and I understand why you stopped hiding. Your mother would be proud of the woman you have become. Yara felt something crack open in her chest. Thank you, ma'am. The colonel stepped back and saluted. Yara returned the salute with a precision that came from somewhere deeper than training. The formation applauded, a sound that washed over her like a wave she had not expected and was not sure she deserved. Afterward, soldiers she barely knew approached to shake her hand and offer congratulations. She accepted their words with grace, still not entirely comfortable with the attention, but no longer running from it. This was who she was now. This was who she had always been. Kettner found her near the water station, escaping the crowd for a moment of quiet. Not bad for a supply clerk, Kettner said with a smile. Former supply clerk. Kittner laughed. Fair enough. She grew serious. I meant what I said before, about whatever you were hiding coming out on your terms or someone else's. I'm glad it came out on yours. So am I. They stood together in comfortable silence, two women who had fought different battles to stand in the same place. The sun beat down on them with familiar intensity, but somehow it felt less oppressive than it had before, less like punishment and more like warmth. That evening, Yara found Wilder waiting outside her quarters. The young private looked healthier than he had during the convoy ambush. The color returned to his face, the fear replaced by something that looked like determination. Specialist Okonkwo, he said, standing at attention. I wanted to thank you, properly, for what you did. You already thanked me, Wilder. I know, but I did not understand then. Not really. He relaxed slightly. You saved my life. You made a shot that nobody should be able to make, and you did it because some kid you barely knew was about to die. He shook his head. I've been trying to figure out how to repay that. And I cannot. There is no way to repay someone for giving you your life back. Yara studied the young soldier's earnest face. You want to know how to repay me? Yes. Be worth it. She let the words settle. Be the soldier I saw in you when I made that shot. Train hard. Stay sharp. And someday, when someone else needs you to be extraordinary, be extraordinary. Wilder nodded slowly, absorbing this. I will try. That is all any of us can do. He saluted and walked away into the evening light. Yara watched him go and felt something that might have been hope for what he could become. The next morning brought a visitor she had not expected. Sergeant First Class Hendricks appeared at the entrance to her quarters, his posture stiff and his expression complicated. Okonkwo, he said, can we talk? She considered refusing. The memory of every insult, every humiliation, every moment of cruelty was still fresh in her mind. But something in his eyes stopped her. A vulnerability she had never seen before. Talk, she said. Hendricks stepped inside and stood awkwardly in the center of the small room. He looked like a man who had rehearsed a speech and forgotten every word of it. I was wrong about you, he said finally. I was wrong about a lot of things. Yara waited. My father was infantry. His father was infantry. I grew up believing that combat was the only thing that mattered, and that anyone who was not combat was less than. He paused. I ended up in logistics because I failed out of Ranger School. Twice. I spent 14 years being angry about that, taking it out on people who did not deserve it. People like me. Hendricks nodded. People like you. Women. Support soldiers. Anyone I could look down on to feel better about my own failures. He met her eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see who you really are. And I was a fool for not seeing it sooner. Yara let the silence stretch between them. Then she spoke. 3 weeks ago, you assigned me to an exposed turret position hoping I would fail. Hoping I would prove you right about women not belonging in forward positions. I know. Instead, I killed the most dangerous sniper in Diyala province. She stepped closer to him. You spent 14 years being angry about your own limitations. I spent 19 months hiding from my own gifts. We both wasted time we cannot get back. Hendricks nodded, shame evident in every line of his face. But here is the difference. Yara held his gaze. I stopped hiding. I stopped letting fear make my decisions. The question is whether you can do the same. Whether you can stop being angry and start being the leader your soldiers deserve. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened, something shifting in his posture. There's a female specialist arriving next week, he said. Transfer from another unit. I was going to assign her to the worst duties. Make her prove herself the way I made you prove yourself. He paused. I'm not going to do that anymore. Why not? Because you proved something that I needed to see. That what someone looks like has nothing to do with what they can do. He moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it is worth, Okonkwo, I am glad you were on that convoy. I'm glad you picked up that rifle. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say that. He left without waiting for a response. Yara stood alone in her quarters, processing the conversation. Forgiveness was not something she was ready to give. Not yet. But something had shifted between them. A wall had come down, or at least developed a crack. She touched her mother's pendant and whispered words that only the empty room could hear. I think I'm finally becoming who you always knew I could be." The orders arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a private who had no idea what the envelope contained. Yara sat on her bunk and read the words 3 times before they fully registered. Transfer approved. Report to Camp Victory, Baghdad, for specialized training and unit assignment. Details classified pending arrival. She was leaving FOB Warhorse. The news spread quickly through the base. By lunch, it seemed like everyone knew that the supply clerk who killed the ghost was being transferred to something bigger. Speculation ran wild. Special operations, sniper school. Some whispered about units that did not officially exist, missions that would never appear in any record. Yara let them speculate. The truth was that she did not know what waited for her in Baghdad. She only knew that, whatever it was, she would face it as herself. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more promises that required her to be less than she was. Delgado found her packing that afternoon. He leaned against the doorframe with an expression that mixed pride and sadness in equal measure. "So this is it," he said. "The great Yara Okonkwo leaves us humble blanket counters behind." She smiled. "You were never humble a day in your life, Tomas." "True." He pushed off the doorframe and walked to her footlocker, where a small pile of personal items waited to be packed. He picked up the plastic Saint's mother had sent, the one Yara had carried during the convoy ambush. "You still have this. You told me to keep it safe. I told you to keep yourself safe." The Saint was just along for the ride. He pressed it in her palm. "Take it with you. Wherever they're sending you, you might need someone watching over you." Yara looked at the chipped paint, the serene expression on the tiny face. "Your mother will be upset. My mother will be thrilled that her saint helped protect the most famous soldier in Diyala province." He grinned. "Besides, I already wrote her about you. She wants to adopt you. I'm not kidding. She asked for your mailing address so she could send you care packages." The laugh that escaped Yara's throat surprised her. It felt good, natural, like something that had been locked away for too long finally finding its way out. "I'm going to miss you," she said. The words came easier than she expected. Delgado's grin softened into something more genuine. "I'm going to miss you too. But this is not goodbye forever. The army is small. We will cross paths again." He straightened to attention and offered a crisp salute. "Until then, Specialist Okonkwo, give them hell." She returned the salute. "Take care of the blankets, Corporal Delgado. Always." He left her alone with her packing and her thoughts. The farewell with Cole then was shorter, more professional, but no less meaningful. The staff sergeant shook her hand firmly and told her she was the best marksman he had ever worked with. Coming from a man who measured praise in milligrams, it meant everything. Kettner walked her to the flight line the next morning. The Black Hawk that would carry her to Baghdad sat waiting on the pad, rotors still, crew performing final checks. "You know," Kettner said, "when I first saw you at PT that morning, I knew there was something different about you. I just could not figure out what it was. And now?" Kettner smiled. "Now I know. You were a warrior pretending to be ordinary. The hardest thing in the world is being something less than what you are." She extended her hand. "Stop pretending, Okonkwo. Be extraordinary. The world needs more women who are willing to be extraordinary." Yara shook her hand. "Thank you. For everything. Do not thank me. Just make us proud." The helicopter's engines began to whine, rotors starting their slow rotation toward flight speed. Yara climbed aboard and found a seat near the window. Through the glass, she could see the FOB she had called home for nearly 2 years. The supply warehouse where she had counted blankets and hidden from her destiny. The motor pool where Hendricks had tried to break her. The guard tower where she had ended Fard al-Rashid's hunt. So much had happened in this place. So much had changed. The helicopter lifted off, and FOB Warhorse grew small beneath her. Soldiers on the ground became dots, then disappeared entirely as the aircraft climbed into the morning sky. Yara watched until there was nothing left to see, then turned her gaze forward. Baghdad waited somewhere beyond the horizon. A new posting, a new mission, a new chapter in a story she was only beginning to write. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the plastic Saint Delgado had given her. The tiny figure smiled up at her with eternal patience. promising protection she was not sure she believed in, but appreciated nonetheless. She tucked it into her vest, close to her heart, next to her mother's pendant. Two tokens, two reminders. One of the friend who had seen her when she was invisible, and one of the mother who had loved her enough to want her safe, even if safety had never been her destiny. The helicopter banked east, following the Tigris River toward the sprawling complexity of Iraq's capital. Below, the landscape scrolled past in shades of brown and tan, dotted with villages and roads and the scars of a war that had changed everything for everyone it touched. Yara closed her eyes and let herself feel the moment. The vibration of the aircraft, the weight of her equipment, the steady beat of her own heart. No longer hiding, no longer afraid. She thought about the girl she had been. 8 years old, holding her father's rifle for the first time, learning that she had a gift most people would never understand. 12 years old, out shooting grown men at competitions, hearing whispers about her future. 18 years old, sitting beside her mother's hospital bed, making a promise she thought she would keep forever. She thought about the woman she had become, the supply clerk who had endured mockery in silence, the soldier who had picked up a rifle when lives hung in the balance, the marksman who had killed the ghost of Diyala and his brother, earning a reputation that would follow her for the rest of her career. Two versions of herself, separated by 19 months of hiding and 1 moment of truth. The helicopter carried her toward whatever came next, and for the first time since her mother's death, Yara Okonkwo felt complete. Not because of the medals or the recognition or the transfer to a unit she did not yet know, but because she had finally stopped fighting against herself. Some promises were meant to be kept. Others were meant to be transformed into something better. Her mother had wanted her to be safe. And now, finally, she understood what that really meant. Safety was not hiding from who you are. Safety was becoming so good at being yourself that nothing could ever make you hide again. If this story moved you, drop a comment and share your thoughts about what resonated most. Maybe you know someone whose hidden abilities surprised everyone around them. Or maybe you have experienced a moment when you stopped hiding and started being who you were truly meant to be. We would love to hear your story. The helicopter flew on toward Baghdad, toward the future, toward whatever waited for a woman who had finally stopped being labeled and started being legendary. And somewhere in the sky above Iraq, Yara Okonkwo smiled.